I was sitting in the master bedroom. The clock on the nightstand read 3:15 a.m. My phone buzzed on the mahogany surface. The screen lit up the dark room. Unknown caller. I knew that number. I slid my finger across the glass. I didn't say hello. I just waited. A man's voice came through the line. Crisp. Professional. Northern. Mrs. Beaumont, this is Agent Miller with the FBI's. I pulled the duvet tighter around me. My heart didn't race. It slowed down. This is the audit coming to a close. Agent Miller continued. We have your husband in custody. He's been detained at Charles de Gaulle Airport. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My bare feet hit the cold hardwood floor. Detained, I repeated. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Yes, ma'am. He was attempting to board a flight to Dubai. Dubai? That was new, even for him. I looked at the wedding ring on the dresser. It was just gold and carbon now. He had unauthorized company funds in his possession, Agent Miller said. I walked over to the window. The moonlight was hitting the Spanish moss in the yard. It looked like ghosts hanging from the trees. He tried to use the corporate card for a one-way business class ticket that flagged the Treasury Department's system immediately. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. 3 months of spreadsheets, 3 months of hidden cameras, 3 months of smelling jasmine perfume in my own car. It all came down to one swipe of a card in Paris. The numbers don't lie. People. Is he being released? I asked. I already knew the answer. Miller laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. No, ma'am. He is being extradited back to the United States to face charges for international wire fraud. My knees gave out. I sat down on the window bench. The wood was hard against my legs. Extradited? That word hung in the air like smoke. You know that feeling when you realize you've actually won? Not just a little bit, but completely, utterly. It's terrifying, and honestly, it is the best. Mrs. Beaumont, are you there? Miller asked. I'm here, I whispered. A civil attorney. The company is going to want to recover those funds. I looked at the ceiling. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of an accountant finding a missing decimal. I don't need a lawyer, Agent Miller, I said. I am the majority shareholder of the company. Silence on the line. Absolute silence. Excuse me, he said. I transferred the Class A shares last. So don't worry about recovering the funds. They're already back in the ledger. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was electric. Good luck with the paperwork, I said. I hung up the phone and poured my... The air in Savannah never tasted so sweet. But then I remembered something. Something I forgot to calculate. One variable I left unchecked. Clementine. She was in Paris too. And if you've ever watched a true crime documentary, you know the accomplice always slips up first. And this is where it gets... Because Clementine Vance isn't just sitting in a hotel room waiting for a lawyer. I was sitting in the master bedroom. The clock on the nightstand read 3:15 a.m. My phone buzzed on the mahogany surface. The screen lit up the dark room. Unknown caller. I knew that number. I slid my finger across the glass. I didn't say hello. I just waited. A man's voice came through the line. Crisp. Professional. Northern. Mrs. Beaumont, this is Agent Miller with the FBI's white-collar crime unit. I pulled the duvet tighter around me. My heart didn't race. It slowed down. This is the audit coming to a close. Agent Miller continued. We have your husband in custody. He's been detained at Charles de Gaulle Airport. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My bare feet hit the cold hardwood floor. Detained, I repeated. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Yes, ma'am. He was attempting to board a flight to Dubai. Dubai? That was new, even for him. I looked at the wedding ring on the dresser. It was just gold and carbon now. He had unauthorized company funds in his possession, Agent Miller said. I walked over to the window. The moonlight was hitting the Spanish moss in the yard. It looked like ghosts hanging from the trees. He tried to use the corporate card for a one-way business class ticket, Miller explained, that flagged the Treasury Department's system immediately. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. 3 months of spreadsheets, 3 months of hidden cameras, 3 months of smelling jasmine perfume in my own car. It all came down to one swipe of a card in Paris. The numbers don't lie. People do. Is he being released? I asked. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear him say it. Miller laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. No, ma'am. He is being extradited back to the United States to face charges for international wire fraud. My knees gave out. I sat down on the window bench. The wood was hard against my legs. Extradited? That word hung in the air like smoke. You know that feeling when you realize you've actually won? Not just a little bit, but completely, utterly. It's terrifying, and honestly, it is the best feeling in the world. Mrs. Beaumont, are you there? Miller asked. I'm here, I whispered. You might want to get yourself a good lawyer, he said. A civil attorney. The company is going to want to recover those funds. I looked at the ceiling. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of an accountant finding a missing decimal. I don't need a lawyer, Agent Miller, I said. I am the majority shareholder of the company now. Silence on the line. Absolute silence. Excuse me, he said. I transferred the Class A shares last week. I told him. So don't worry about recovering the funds. They're already back in the ledger. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was electric. Good luck with the paperwork, I said. I hung up the phone and poured myself a glass of sweet tea. The air in Savannah never tasted so sweet. But then I remembered something. Something I forgot to calculate. One variable I left unchecked. Clementine. She was in Paris too, and she wasn't on a corporate card. If you've ever watched a true crime documentary, you know the accomplice always slips up first. And this is where it gets really messy. Because Clementine Vance isn't just sitting in a hotel room waiting for a lawyer. She's live streaming. Right now. You saw that Instagram photo. You saw the Dom Perignon. But let me tell you how the rot actually started. It wasn't in Paris. It was right here in Savannah 3 months ago. I remember the date exactly, October 14th. I had come home late from Mercer and Associates. I walked into the front hallway of our townhouse. But the air felt heavy. It didn't smell like Thaddeus's usual cherry pipe tobacco. It smelled like jasmine. Expensive, cloying, sweet jasmine perfume. I saw the light spilling out from under his study door. The shadows are stretching long across the foyer floor. I walked toward the door. I could hear him typing. Fast, furious typing. I opened the door. He jumped. He slammed his laptop shut. He gave me that tight, polite smile. The one he saves for people he thinks are stupid. He asked, "You're home early?" I didn't answer. I just walked over to him. I leaned in close to his collar. I could smell it. The jasmine. It was clinging to his shirt. It was choking me. I asked him about the smell. He didn't even flinch. He said, "I bought a candle today. Do you like it?" He pointed to an empty spot on his desk. There was no candle there. Thaddeus hates scented candles. He always says they give him a headache. That was it. That was the first unbalanced entry in our marriage's spreadsheet. When you're an accountant, you learn to trust the discrepancies. The numbers don't lie. People do. You know that feeling when your gut is screaming at you, but your brain keeps trying to make excuses? That was me standing in his study. I told myself I was overreacting. I wasn't. The next morning, I went out to the garage. The Tesla was parked in its usual spot. It was a cool morning. The concrete floor was cold against my socks. I opened the passenger door. I sat down. I ran my hand along the beige leather cushion. I felt something crinkle under the fabric. I reached deep into the crevice. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was a receipt. Crumpled. Warm from the seat heater. It was from a boutique on Bruton Street. Jasmine Noir candle, quantity 2. Total $120 and $cents. The timestamp was 4:30 p.m. 2 days ago. But there were no candles in this house. I held that receipt in my hand. The paper felt like evidence. Because it was. That weekend we had Sunday dinner at his mother's house. Dorothea's dining room is always freezing. The chandelier was sparkling over our heads. Thaddeus was in a bad mood. He was aggressively cutting his steak. The silverware was clinking loudly against the china plate. He said, "I don't understand why Mother is so obsessed with these legacy trust documents. She keeps sending me papers to sign. It's endless." He was annoyed. He just wanted to eat and leave. But I just sipped my wine. I saw the opening. He was distracted. He was sloppy. And a sloppy fraudster is the easiest kind to catch. I realized right then that I wasn't going to be the crying wife on the news. I was going to be the forensic audit that ruined him. That Sunday night, I went back to my home office. I turned on the lamp. The light hummed softly. I sat at my desk. The scream lit up my face in the dark room. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Project Jasmine. And I want to know what you would have done. Would you have confronted him right there in the study? Or would you have started the audit? I sat in the home office. The door was locked. The cursor blinked on the screen. Project Jasmine. It was time to go to work. By trade, I find things people hide in numbers. Thaddeus was sloppy, but he was arrogant. He was wrong. I logged into the joint business portal. The password was our anniversary date. Original, I know. The screen glowed in the dark room. I pulled up the ledger for the last quarter. Rows of transactions flooded the page. My eyes scanned the withdrawals column. There it was, a pattern. $5,000 withdrawals labeled consulting fees. They happened every 2 weeks like clockwork. I clicked the first one. The destination was a Western Union account. I traced it further. It bounced to Venmo. Then it landed in a Cash App account. The user handle was C. Vance Unsug Mant 99. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a sickness, it was a realization. I opened a second tab. Instagram. I typed in the name from the search history. Clementine Vaff. Her profile popped up. Private. But I saw the mutual followers. Thad's best friend. His brother. I went back to the bank statement. The dates were the smoking gun. October 2nd, withdrawal of $5,000. Thad was in Charleston that night. Business trip, he said. Clementine posted a photo that night. Dinner at the obstinate daughter. I did the math in my head. That dinner cost $300, not $5,000. So where did the rest go? I scrolled through her tagged photos. A new handbag. Bottega Veneta, price tag, $4,000. Posted October 3rd. The caption said, "Love when daddy spoils me." Daddy. That word made my blood run cold. He wasn't just sleeping with her, he was funding her. With our money. I printed the page. The printer in the corner whirred loudly. The paper was warm when I touched it. I highlighted the transaction in yellow. Then I highlighted the Instagram post. Side by side. Evidence. I kept scrolling. September 15th, $5,000 withdrawal. That was in Atlanta. Clementine posted a spa day. $2,000 worth of treatments. August 20th, $5,000 withdrawal. Dad was working late at the office. Clementine posted a new puppy, a French bulldog. Those dogs cost $3,000 easy. I tallied it up. $45,000 in 3 months. That's embezzlement. That's a felony. You know what's funny? He thought he was being smart. He labeled it consulting fees. I checked her LinkedIn. She's an influencer. Her only skill is taking selfies in bad lighting. Daddy has tried to cook the books, but he forgot who he was married to. I don't just look at the numbers. I live in them. The air conditioning kicked on. I felt a chill on my arms. But inside, I was burning. It wasn't the betrayal anymore. It was the incompetence. If you're going to steal, don't leave a paper trail a mile wide. I leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked. I looked at the folder on my desktop. Project Jasmine. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the bottom line. And the bottom line was that he was bleeding the company dry. I checked the time. 4:15 a.m. The sun would be up soon. I saved the file. Then I emailed it to myself. And to a secure cloud drive Dorothy has set up for me, I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet. Savannah sleeps, but sins don't. I watched a car drive past slowly. I wondered if he was in that car. No, he was probably in a hotel bed somewhere, oblivious. He thought he won. He thought he had the pretty girl and the secret life, but he forgot the golden rule of accounting. For every debit, there must be a credit, and his credit just ran out. I want to know what you would have done right then. Would you have called him, screamed, or would you have done what I did? I went to the kitchen and poured another glass of wine. I needed to be clear for the next step. I sat back down at the desk. I opened the corporate bylaws. I needed to find the clause about gross misconduct. Spoiler alert, it's in there. And it's brutal. If this story is hitting you hard, just know you aren't alone. We find the truth, and then we use it. I was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went, because this wasn't just a divorce waiting to happen. It was an indictment. He wasn't just sleeping with her, he was using company funds to pay for her lifestyle. And that made him very, very fireable. If the story meant something to you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I've got more stories to tell. And some of them are even worse than this one, like this video if you made it to the end. And drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done. I read every single one. I found the gross misconduct clause at 4:15 a.m. But a clause is just words on a page. It needs an enforcer. And in Savannah, there is only one judge that matters. Dorothea Beaumont. I invited her to tea at the Gastonia. It was a Tuesday. The air conditioning was humming low. It was freezing inside to combat the Georgia heat. The table was set with bone china, silver spoons, heavy linens. It felt like a funeral parlor for a marriage that hadn't died yet. People think she hates me. They see a cold woman who looks down her nose at everyone. They're wrong. We share one true religion, the family reputation. I didn't ask for her help. I didn't beg. I simply laid the evidence on the table. First the photo. Thaddeus and Clementine entering the Lamaris Hotel bar in Paris. It was grainy, a zoomed-in screenshot from a friend's story, but you could see his hand. It was on her lower back, possessive. Dorothea's hand trembled when she touched the paper, just for a fraction of a second. Then she went perfectly still, her eyes narrowed behind her tortoiseshell glasses. Then I laid out the bank transfers, highlighted in yellow. Consulting fees, $45,000 in 90 days. The trail went from the business account to a Western Union, then to Venmo. User, CVance9699, embezzlement is a felony, I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. But an SEC audit, that is public record. The Savannah Morning News would love that headline. Beaumont's son under investigation. Had you ever seen a matriarch realize her legacy is threatened? It is terrifying. She didn't look at me. She stared at the numbers. Her mind was calculating the social cost, the whisper campaigns at the country club, the canceled invitations. I remembered our wedding day 5 years ago on the church steps. She had grabbed Thaddeus's arm. Her grip left a bruise. She hissed in his ear, "Discretion, Thaddeus. A Beaumont is never the scandal." He had laughed then. He wasn't laughing now. He wasn't even there. But his sins were spread out on the table between us. The trust, I said. If we move quickly, we can protect the principal, but we have to act before he signs those papers he's been ignoring. Dorothea picked up her teacup. Her lipstick left a red stain on the rim. She took a long, slow sip. The silence stretched out, tight, like a wire about to snap. "Does he know?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, a blade. "He thinks I'm a quiet housewife who shops too much," I said. "He has no idea I'd been auditing him for months." She set the cup down. Click. The sound was final. "I will handle the lawyer," she said. "Thaddeus has been sloppy. We do not tolerate sloppy." I felt a chill run down my spine. Not from the air conditioning. It was the look in her eyes. Pure calculation. She didn't care about his heart. She cared about the balance sheet. "You know," I said, leaning in slightly, "I could have just divorced him, taken half, but this is cleaner." She actually smiled. A thin, tight smile. It was the first time I'd ever seen her look at me with respect. We weren't enemies anymore. We were co-conspirators. The waitress tried to refill our water. Dorothea didn't even look at her. She just held up a hand. "Stop." We weren't there for the service. We were there for the execution. She poured more tea into my cup. The steam rose between us like a curtain. We were alone in the crowded room, bound by a secret that could destroy a family. Dorothea didn't cry. She just picked up her silver spoon and said, "Cut him off, Soleil. Cut him off at the knees." Dorothea's silver spoon hit the china. It made a sharp, high-pitched ping. It sounded like a gavel, like a judge pronouncing a sentence. I walked out of her townhouse into the Savannah heat. The air was thick, like wet wool. It stuck to my skin. I didn't feel heavy. I felt weightless. The decision was made. I got in my car and drove home. The garage door was open. It was a dark, empty mouth waiting to swallow me whole. But I didn't care. I had work to do. I walked into my home office. I locked the door behind me. The room was cool. The air conditioner hummed in the window. I sat at my mahogany desk. The wood was smooth under my fingertips. I opened my laptop. The light from the screen washed over my face. I clicked on the folder named Project Jasmine. It was full of death for a marriage. I opened a Q3 ledger one last time. The numbers were red, angry red, total misappropriation, $45,000. In 90 days, he stole 45 grand to buy her purses, to fund her trips. You can't cook the books on karma. The ledger always balances in the end. I wasn't going to call Thaddeus. That would be a waste of my breath. I opened a new email draft. I addressed it to Mr. Abernathy. He is Thaddeus's boss. He is a man who appreciates precision. The subject line had to be perfect. It had to demand attention. I typed urgent fiduciary irregularities South American accounts. In the body, I kept it strictly professional. No emotion, just facts. I have identified unauthorized withdrawals from the shipping ledger. Funds totaling $45,000 have been diverted. They appear to be funding a personal subsidiary. See attached PDF. I attached the file. It was 60 pages long. Every transaction to C minor dine and was highlighted in neon yellow. And then I saw it, a line I had missed before. A recurring charge, Global Secure VPN subscription, $19.99 a month, since October. Why does a shipping manager need an encrypted IP address? What is he hiding that a standard firewall can't cover? I highlighted that line too. I added a note in the email. Note the encrypted VPN usage. This suggests premeditated concealment. I didn't sign it Love Soleil. I typed Mrs. Beaumont, formerly forensic. My cursor hovered over the mouse. My heart rate didn't even spike. You know that feeling when you finally let go of a rope burn? It stings at first. But then, you feel the relief. I clicked send. The message whooshed away into the digital ether. I stared at the screen. I watched the clock on the wall tick. 1 minute passed, then 2. The room was perfectly silent. Suddenly, the status changed next to the message. Read at 9:42 a.m. I didn't pick up the phone to call Abernathy. I didn't need to. The silence on the other end of that email spoke volumes. It was the silence of men in suits checking their watches. It was the sound of a legal team being assembled. It was the sound of Thaddeus's career ending before breakfast. About an hour later, my cell phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message from Thad. It made me laugh out loud. Flight delayed. Staying in Paris an extra day. Business stuff. He was probably lying in a hotel bed with her. He was planning to stay another day in paradise. He didn't know the walls were closing in back home. Mr. Abernathy didn't fire him immediately. That's not how the firm works. They value discretion too much. They prefer to do these things quietly. My phone rang an hour later. Restricted number. I picked it up. It was the senior partner's secretary. Her voice sounded tight. Mr. Abernathy has called an emergency meeting for Friday, Mrs. Beaumont. She claimed it was to discuss quarterly projections. We both knew that was a lie. It was a tribunal. If you've ever been betrayed, you know this feeling. It's a mix of sadness and cold, hard satisfaction. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Would you have warned him, or would you have let him walk into the trap? Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to guess. Because I promise you, nobody saw this coming. Thaddeus thought he was coming home to a wife. He didn't know he was walking into a war room. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Friday was 2 days away, but I knew something nobody else knew. Thaddeus wasn't going to make it to Friday. You ever watch someone pack a bag and realize you are already planning the funeral for your marriage? That was me, standing in our bedroom last October. Thaddeus was zipping up his monogrammed Louis Vuitton suitcase. The gold initials TB glinted under the lamplight. He told me he was headed to Miami for a logistics conference. 3 days of seminars and shrimp cocktails. I just stood there, leaning against the doorframe, watching him move. He was humming something. A light, happy tune that made my stomach turn. I walked over to the ironing board. I picked up the shirt he had laid out. It was Egyptian cotton, stiff and expensive, just like him. I ran the iron over the collar. The steam hissed, filling the silence between us. I was memorizing the details, the way he smoothed his hair in the mirror, the check of his watch, the specific rhythm of his lies. He turned around and held out his arms. He needed help with his tie. It was a navy blue Hermes tie. He liked things tight. I stepped closer. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and old money. I looped the silk around my fingers. I pulled the knot up to his throat. He looked at me in the mirror and smiled. That charming, boyish smile that used to make my knees weak. Now it just looked like a calculation. I smiled back, cold and sharp. He had no idea the tie clip I was fastening was wired. I wanted to record that goodbye, just in case he slipped up. I needed audio proof for the file. You know that feeling when your gut is screaming at you, but your brain keeps making excuses? I stopped making excuses months ago. I smoothed his lapels. I patted his chest, right over the microphone. "Have a safe flight, honey," I said. My voice sounded steady, even. He kissed my cheek. It was quick, perfunctory, like checking a box on a form. Then he grabbed his phone. He left it sitting on the marble counter. The screen lit up with a notification. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. I saw the reflection in the vanity mirror. It was an airline confirmation. Delta Flight 49-2, Savannah to Miami. But I looked closer. The date was right, but the return flight, it was missing. The ticket was one way in the system, even though he told me he would be home Sunday night. He picked up the phone and slid it into his pocket. He grabbed his bag. The wheels clattered on the hardwood floor. We walked to the front door together. The Georgia heat was already waiting outside, heavy and suffocating. He opened the door. He stepped out onto the porch. "Don't wait up," he said. "I'll be busy." I watched him walk to the Tesla. He tossed the bag in the trunk. He got in and started the engine. He waved one last time. I lifted my hand. A small, precise wave. He thought he was flying to Miami to see his logistics friends. He thought he was flying to freedom, but I knew what was on that ticket. I knew what was waiting for him when he landed. He wasn't just stepping onto a plane. He was walking into a trap I had set 3 states wide. And I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little bit. I felt the numbers finally lining up. The audit was about to begin. You ever watched a marriage die in real time? I don't mean the slow fade. I mean the sudden stop. It was a Wednesday in October. The humidity in Savannah was oppressive. It felt like a wet wool blanket. I was sitting on the front porch swing. The wood creaked under my weight. My iPad was glowing on the wicker table. I had the Find My app open. We shared it for safety. Or so he thought. That told everyone he was flying to Miami. A fishing tournament with the guys. Just 3 days. I refreshed the screen. The little blue dot wasn't in Florida. It was moving north. Fast. It was 2047 a.m. I know because I checked my watch. The cicadas were screaming in the live oaks. It sounded like a warning siren. I refreshed the map again. The dot blinked. Then it moved. It wasn't at the marina. It was at Terminal 4 at JFK. I opened the drink business portal on my laptop. There it was. The Amex receipt from that morning. He used the corporate card. $2,450.65 for a business class ticket to New York. But the destination wasn't New York either. The final leg was Charles de Gaulle. Paris. Do you see the math here? Company funds used for personal travel. That isn't just adultery. That is embezzlement. That is wire fraud. I zoomed in on the Google timeline. There was a 6-hour layover at JFK, near the TWA hotel. Clementine lives in New York half the year. She wasn't waiting for him in Paris. She met him at the airport. The timeline showed him stopping at a hotel there for exactly 5 hours and 40 minutes. I felt sick, but not for the reason you think. I felt sick because he was sloppy. I took a sip of my tea. The ice had melted. It was watery and lukewarm, just like my husband. I watched the dot cross the Atlantic. It moved slow, steady. He was running away from his life, and he was paying for it with Mercer and Associates money. I screenshot the map. I screenshot the credit card charge. I saved them to the cloud under a file named Taxes 2024. The porch light was flickering above me. A moth was battering itself against the glass bulb. Thump, thump, thump. That moth was Thaddeus, destroying himself against a light he couldn't have. I looked at the merchant code on the receipt. Merchant category airlines. The reference number was 12 digits long. Every digit was a nail in his coffin. I could smell the jasmine in the garden. It was overpowering. It smelled like a funeral. I sat there and I watched him commit a federal crime. From my rocking chair, in my pajamas. It was almost too easy. I want you to tell me in the comments, At what point does cheating become a felony? Because for me, it was right then. My heart wasn't breaking anymore. It was calculating. It was balancing the books. He didn't know I could see him. He thought he was invisible. But data leaves a trail. Just like footprints in the mud, he was thousands of miles away. He was technically out of jurisdiction for the Savannah police. But international wire fraud? That was a whole different beast. You know that feeling when you finally realize you aren't the victim anymore? You're the judge, jury, and executioner. I sat in my home office. The glow from my monitor was the only light in the room. The clock on the wall read 2052 a.m. Thaddeus was likely finishing his dessert in Paris. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called the bank. But not our local branch in Savannah. I dialed the corporate fraud hotline in New York. A man named Gary answered. His voice sounded tired. I didn't care about his tiredness. I gave him the corporate account number. Then I gave him Thaddeus's social security number. I told him we have a level 4 security breach. That's code for the owner's husband is stealing from us. Gary didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He just asked for the verification code. I looked at the document on my desk, the one Dorothea and I had signed 2 weeks ago. I read him the 12-digit code. I said, initiate emergency lockdown protocol. You should have seen my face. I wasn't smiling. I was just balancing the ledger. Are you sure, Mrs. Beaumont? Derry asked. This will freeze all linked assets immediately. I looked at the map on my screen. The dot was hovering over the 8th arrondissement. I said, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I pressed the red button on my phone screen. It was satisfying, like cracking a pecan shell. Within seconds, the system went to work. It wasn't just his personal Amex, it was the corporate Visa. It was the fuel card for the boat. It was the emergency backup MasterCard he kept in his safe deposit box. Every single piece of plastic in his wallet became nothing more than trash. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. The screen lit up the darkroom. A notification from the banking app. Card ending in 4091 frozen due to suspicious activity. The time was 2053 a.m. here. That meant it was 8053 p.m. in Paris. Prime dinner time. Have you ever tried to picture the exact moment someone's world falls apart? I could see it. Lemiris has those crystal chandeliers. The light reflects off the silverware. Thaddeus was probably ordering another bottle of Dom Perignon. He likes to show off. He would have motioned for the waiter. A young man in a tuxedo would bring the leather folder. Thaddeus wouldn't even look at the total. He'd just hand over the Amex Black card. That card was his entire personality. The waiter would dip his head. He would swipe the card in that little machine he carried. Then he would pause. The waiter would frown. He would tap the screen of his machine. Then he would look at Thaddeus. I am sorry, sir. The card has been declined. Can you imagine the silence at that table? Clementine would stop laughing. She would put down her wine glass. Her eyes would go wide. Thaddeus would try the business card. That one would beep too. He would try the emergency backup. Nothing. This is the trap I set 3 states wide. Actually, 3 time zones wide. Because the money was crossing borders, the Department of Treasury gets a flag. He isn't just broke. He is now a person of interest. I forwarded the freeze notification to Dorothea. Her phone was probably on her nightstand in Charleston. She would wake up to the news. She would pour her coffee and read the alert. And she would know that the surgery was successful. The cancer was cut out. I sat back in my leather chair. The air conditioning hummed quietly. It sounded like victory. I reached for my tea. It was cold now, but I didn't mind. He was in Paris, living the high life, with less money in his pocket than a runaway teenager. Before I tell you what he did next, I have a question for you. Would you have frozen the accounts immediately, or would you have let him spend a little more first? Drop a comment and tell me. I read every single one. You ever sat in a lawyer's office in Savannah? It's quiet. Too quiet. The air always smells like old paper and lemon polish. I was sitting in a leather chair across from Dorothea Beaumont. She looked like she was going to a garden party, not an execution. She wore a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my first car. Mr. Henderson, the estate lawyer, looked nervous. He kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Dorothea didn't sweat. She just stared at the mahogany desk. She told him to read the clause out loud. Moral turpitude. That was the phrase of the day. It sounds like something from a Dickens novel, doesn't it? But in the Beaumont Family Trust, it's a nuclear weapon. It turns out Thad didn't just cheat on me. He cheated the trust. Do you remember that vintage Jaguar? The 1963 E-Type? The one his daddy left him in the will? Thad sold it. I found the sale record in the trash. He sold it for $65,000. That money bought the plane tickets. It bought the champagne at Le Matriarch. It bought the hotel suite in Paris. Every dollar of that trip was tainted, and according to the bylaws Dorothea wrote 30 years ago, using trust assets for illicit or illicit behavior unbecoming a Beaumont makes the assets forfeit. That means the money goes back. But the penalty? The penalty is the control. She looked me in the eye. Her gaze was sharp. He thinks he's a king, Salel, she said, but kings can be deposed. She pushed a thick document across the desk. The paper was heavy, cream-colored. It was a stock transfer agreement. All of Thad's Class A shares, every single voting right, transferring to me. I looked at the date stamped on the top. She had backdated the effective period. It was valid 24 hours before he even posted that photo on Instagram. The math was beautiful. It was forensic poetry. He was in Paris spending money he didn't technically have the rights to control anymore. I hesitated for a second. I didn't want the company. I liked my spreadsheets. I liked being invisible. But Dorothea reached over and patted my hand. Her rings were cold against my skin. Invisibility is a luxury, Soleil, she whispered. Power is a necessity. I picked up the pen. It was heavy. A black Mont Blanc. I signed my name on the dotted line. Soleil Matsuda. Majority owner. The sound of the notary seal hitting the paper, that was the sound of his life ending. It wasn't a bang, it was a thud. Dorothea smiled. It was the first time I'd ever seen her look genuinely happy. Now, she said, cut him off at the knees. I walked out of the office onto Bull Street. The humidity hit me like a wet blanket. The sun was shining on the historic squares. Tourists were taking pictures of the cobblestones. They had no idea what just happened in that building. They had no idea I was holding a legal document that could ruin a man. I looked at my phone. Thad had posted a new story. It was a selfie. Living the dream. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud on the sidewalk. He had no idea. He was standing in a palace made of sand, and I was the tide coming in. I went to bed that night not as the betrayed wife, but as the majority shareholder of my husband's former employer. Be honest, would you have signed that paper? Or would you have given him a chance to explain? The bedroom was pitch black, except for the sharp blue light cutting through the dark. It was 10 p.m. here in Savannah. Do the math. That meant it was 4 a.m. in Paris. My phone vibrated against the mahogany nightstand. Once, twice. A frantic rhythm. I looked at the screen. The caller ID simply read husband. He never calls this late. Unless there is an emergency. Or unless he just tried to pay for room service at Le Maurice. And his card got declined. I didn't reach for it. I just let it buzz. The sound rattled the glass of water on the table. The ice cubes clinked. It was a delicate sound. Like wind chimes, I lay perfectly still under the heavy duvet. The Egyptian cotton was cool against my skin. I could picture him exactly, sitting in that lavish marble bathroom, holding that black Amex card, watching the waiter's face turn apologetic. The machine beeping. Declined. The numbers had finally caught up with him. You can't cook the books on karma, folks. The ledger always balances in the end. The phone stopped ringing. Silence rushed back into the room. Then it started again. Immediate. Desperate. I picked up the phone to check the lock screen. The list was long. A vertical column of red missed calls. 12, 13, 15. He was panicking. He was realizing that the floor had turned to quicksand. You know that feeling? Watching someone who controlled you suddenly lose all control? I want you to imagine it. It is better than sweet tea. I set the phone back down on the wood. It buzzed again. 16 times now. He was trying to figure out where his money went. He probably tried the corporate visa first. That was frozen. Then the personal Amex. Also frozen. Maybe he even called his mother. But Dorothea wasn't answering either. He was alone in a foreign country, with a watch he couldn't sell and a mistress he couldn't afford. And I was here, in my quiet bedroom, holding the keys to the kingdom. He called for the 17th time. The vibration was incessant. It was annoying me now. It was breaking my concentration. I sat up. The silk sheets pooled around my waist. I unlocked the screen. The bright light flashed in my eyes. I saw the text bubble underneath his name. "So Leo, pick up, it's an emergency." I laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. It was definitely an emergency, just not the kind he thought it was. I swiped my thumb across the green button. I put the phone to my ear. I didn't say a word. I heard static on the line, then rapid breathing. "So Leo?" His voice was cracked. High-pitched. "The cards aren't working. I can't pay for the hotel." He was waiting for me to tell him it was a mistake. He was waiting for me to fix it. To transfer funds. To be the good wife. But I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his boss. I listened to the panic in his throat, the financial ruin in his tone. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I finally answered, but I didn't speak. I just let him hear the silence of a woman who no longer gave a damn. I didn't hang up the phone. I just lowered it to the mattress. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. 30 seconds later, the screen lit up again. A new notification slid into view. Voicemail. I picked the phone back up. The audio waveform was jagged and red. It showed high volume. Pure panic. I pressed play and held it to my ear. Soleil. The card was declined. His voice was a harsh whisper. He was out of breath. "I don't know what's happening. The hotel manager is asking for payment." I could hear the ambient noise of a lobby. Shuffling feet. A distant elevator ding. "Call me back." "Please, it's an emergency." He sounded small. Whiny, like a child lost in a grocery store. I played it back 3 times. I savored the crack in his voice. I was lying in the master bedroom. The sheets were cool Egyptian cotton. I took a sip of water from my glass. The ice cubes clinked softly. It wasn't the affair that killed the marriage. Affairs are messy, but they are human. This was bad math. You see, Thaddeus spent our marriage thinking I was just a quiet girl from Savannah. He thought I was decorative, like a vase or a nice watch. He didn't know I was the auditor. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene at Lavish. The lobby with its crystal chandeliers. The concierge in his tailored suit. Thaddeus, sweating in his designer suit. Clementine, probably pouting in the background. Imagine standing in the most expensive hotel in Paris. Your black card gets declined. The line behind you is growing. People are staring. That is a specific kind of hell, and I put him there. "I don't understand," he had said to me once. "Why do you care about the receipts so much?" I cared because receipts are the truth. People lie. Receipts do not. I wonder if he has tried to call Dorothea yet. His mother? If he did, she didn't answer. We spoke an hour ago. She is probably sitting in her parlor, drinking tea, ignoring his calls too. You have to understand the beauty of this moment. He isn't just broke. He is stranded. He is thousands of miles from home with zero liquidity. The house is in a trust he can't touch. The brokerage account is frozen. The corporate card is dead, and he has no idea. He still thinks this is a glitch. A bank error. He thinks he can fix it with a phone call. I looked at the time. 10:15 p.m. In Paris, it was 4:15 a.m. The city was waking up. But for Thaddeus, the night was just getting started. This man once told me that money was just a way to keep score. He said he was winning. He was standing in our kitchen, pouring a glass of scotch that cost more than my car payment. I looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. The red numbers glowed in the dark. 10:22 p.m. He had been trying to pay for that hotel room for 20 minutes. He was probably pacing the hotel room floor right now. Clementine was probably screaming at him. "Daddy, fix this." I smiled into the dark room. If you've ever been betrayed, you know this feeling. It's cold, it's sharp, and it feels absolutely right. I sat up and leaned against the headboard. My hands were steady. My heart rate was a steady 60 beats per minute. I had 3 months of spreadsheets to back me up. I had the stock transfer agreements sitting in my safe. I had the law. Thaddeus had a stack of declined receipts, and a mistress who loves money more than she loves him. You can't cook the books on karma. Eventually, the audit comes, and the balance always settles. I opened the Messages app. I typed out the words that would finally break him. 3 words. Simple, direct. I hit send. Check your email. I watched the status change, read at 10:24 p.m. He had opened it. I was sitting at my mahogany desk in the home office. The air conditioning was humming. It was a low, steady sound. I had sent the email 2 minutes ago. The subject line was brutal in its simplicity. Q3 expense report, audit required. But the attachment, that was the knife. It was a 12-page PDF. Every transfer to C. Uxpan's 99 was highlighted in red. Every Venmo transaction was bolded. I knew exactly what he was seeing. He was seeing his own crime scene, mapped out in Excel. I took a sip of my tea. It was cold, but my blood was running hot. You know that feeling when you finally have the upper hand? It is intoxicating. Suddenly, my phone lit up again. Not a text, not a call. An Instagram notification from Clementine. Of course. I tapped the screen. There it was, a story post. I stared at the image. It was a close-up of a small cafe table. 2 chocolate croissants. 2 cups of black coffee. The steam was rising from the cups. The caption made me laugh out loud. Breakfast of champions. And then I saw the tag. She tagged him. Adius Beaumont, right there in plain sight. I zoomed in on the photo. I needed to be sure. A hand was reaching for the espresso spoon. It was a man's hand. Hairy knuckles, a gold signet ring, and the watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus. I bought that for him. I saved for 6 months to buy it, and there it was, on his wrist. In a cafe in Paris, while his wife was in Savannah, freezing him out. But the best part? The location tag. 8th arrondissement, Paris. She might as well have sent a notarized affidavit to the FBI. See, hiding assets is a white-collar crime. But flaunting them? That is proof of intent. The VPN wasn't enough anymore. This post put him physically in the location where the fraud occurred. I sat back in my leather chair. The numbers finally balanced. The debits matched the credits. I wonder what you would have done. Would you have called him? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Watch and wait. She thought she was showing off her lifestyle. She thought she was winning. She has no idea the corporate visa is maxed out. She has no idea the Amex is frozen. She probably thinks Daddy is just going to transfer more funds. But the well is dry. The bucket is empty, and I am holding the handle. I looked at the time. 10:30 p.m. In Paris, it was 4:30 a.m. They were likely awake, panicking, or maybe still arrogant. Maybe they were laughing. It didn't matter. The screenshot was already saved. The metadata was captured. The authorities now had the exact coordinates of their suspect. I could almost hear the sirens in the distance. Not here, in my head. She thought she was flexing. She was really just serving him up on a silver platter. The cursor blinked at me from the middle of the white screen. On, off, on, off. It was a steady rhythmic heartbeat. I sat at my mahogany desk in the home office. It was nearly 11 o'clock. The rest of the house was pitch black. I was alone with the numbers and the silence. I opened my laptop. The Apple logo cut through the darkness like a knife. I logged into the secure server. My fingers knew the password by muscle memory. I started a new email. It wasn't a draft, it was a final document. I addressed it to Mr. Beaumont. I didn't use Thad. I didn't use husband, just the formal title of a man who was about to be unemployed. Then I moved to the CC field. This was the part that made my hand shake just a little. I typed Dorothea Beaumont, the matriarch, the woman who handed me the shovel to bury him with. I typed Mr. Abernathy, the senior partner, the man who hated incompetence more than he hated sin. I typed legal counsel, the firm that held the wills. You know that feeling when you were holding a winning poker hand and you look around the table and realize nobody else knows they've already lost? That was me. Sitting in the dark, holding 4 aces, I typed the subject line. Termination of employment, T. Beaumont. Then I started the body of the email. I kept it short. I kept it brutal. Dear Mr. Beaumont, effective immediately, your employment with Beaumont Logistics is terminated. I paused. I looked at the glass of sweet tea on my coaster. The condensation was dripping onto the wood. I wiped it up. I went back to typing. This termination is due to clear evidence of misappropriation of company funds. I thought about the $45,000, the Venmo transfers, the consulting fees, the money he stole from his own family, and violation of the morality clause in your employment contract. I remembered the photos from Lavish, the champagne, the Patek Philippe watch, the girlfriend. I typed Section 14B, the gross misconduct clause. It was right there in black and white. He had signed it. We had both signed it. On our wedding day, actually. A gift from Dorothea. It turns out you can't cook the books on karma. And you certainly can't cook the books on a legally binding morality clause. Your access to all company accounts and property is revoked effective as of this timestamp. That meant the corporate card he was holding in Paris, the jet, the expense account, all of it. Dead. Have a nice life. I read it over twice. There was no emotion, just math. Assets minus liabilities equals 0. The clack of the keys was loud in the silence. I hovered my mouse over the send button. It was blue, bright blue. If you've ever held someone's fate in your hands, you know it doesn't feel like power. It feels like gravity, heavy, unstoppable. I clicked the button. The email vanished with a soft whoosh sound. It was done. I sat back in my leather chair. It creaked under my weight. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I felt a smile pull at the corner of my mouth. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a settled smile. The books were balanced. The audit was over. Part of me thought this was the end, that he would crawl home and we would divorce. I was wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to guess. Because I promise you, nobody saw this coming. Silence is loud, isn't it? When you know you've just dropped a guillotine blade, the quiet before the slice is deafening. I sat in my home office. The leather of my chair felt cool against my back. The monitor cast a blue glow over the mahogany desk. 11,015 p.m. In Savannah, the crickets were chirping. In Paris, it was 5,005 a.m. I stared at the screen. The email was sent. The read receipt had popped up 5 seconds ago. Terminated, unscory, employee, notice.pdf burst. Read at 5:05 a.m. He had it. My phone buzzed on the desk. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a text message. It was an Instagram notification. At Thaddeus Beaumont posted a new photo. You have to be kidding me. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. Not from fear. From sheer disbelief at the arrogance. I tapped the screen. The image loaded slowly, pixel by pixel. There it was, the Eiffel Tower soaring into a black sky, bursts of gold and white light exploding behind it, fireworks. And there he was, Thaddeus, arm wrapped around Clementine's waist. She was looking up at him, eyes closed, smiling. He was looking at the camera, that smug politician grin plastered on his face. He was wearing the navy blazer I bought him for his father's funeral. The caption was short, 3 words, starting our new chapter, love wins. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound a ledger makes when it slams shut. I want you guys to understand the forensic weight of what I was looking at. This wasn't just a selfie. This was a digital confession. I zoomed in on the screen. The metadata was right there in the corner, posted at 5:10 a.m. Paris time. Just 5 minutes after he read his termination letter. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call his mother. He didn't even call me to beg. He took a selfie, and this is where the numbers get really ugly. You see, proving embezzlement is one thing. It's just math. But proving intent to flee jurisdiction? That is the golden ticket. That is what brings the FBI to the party. You can't cook the books on karma, folks. He had just been served with notice of a federal investigation into wire fraud. And his immediate response? To post a photo of himself in a foreign country, declaring he is starting a new chapter. That is called Exhibit A. I took a screenshot, saved it to the folder labeled Project Jasmine. Then I took a sip of my tea. It was stone cold. The ice had melted, watering down the sweet tea. Just like his entire legacy was being diluted right now. I dialed the secure line on my desk. It rang twice. He did it, I said. I didn't even say hello. He just posted the flight risk evidence. On the other end, Agent Miller sighed. I could hear the rustle of a jacket. Moving fast. We're already moving, Soleil. We coordinated with the French financial unit 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. Dorothea, she must have made the call before I even sent the email. That woman does not mess around. I looked at the photo again. I zoomed in on Thaddeus's wrist. The Patek Philippe Nautilus. It was catching the flash of the fireworks. On his left hand, his tan line was visible. The wedding ring was gone. He had taken it off, probably threw it in the Seine. Or maybe gave it to Clementine as a down payment on her loyalty. I looked at the likes. Rolling in. People from Savannah. People he went to college with. Even his brother Marcus liked it. So happy for you, man, Marcus commented. If you only knew, Marcus. If you only knew your brother was currently standing in a lobby with a target on his back. I refreshed the screen. Clementine had shared it to her story, added a heart sticker. My forever. Oh, honey, your forever is about to get very uncomfortable. I opened the tracking software on my laptop, the one Agent Miller gave me access to. 4 green dots appeared on a satellite map of Paris. They were moving fast, north on Rue de Rivoli, straight toward the 8th arrondissement. Toward Le Maurice? I checked the time, 11:20 p.m. The gap between the post and the raid was closing. I imagined him there, standing on the balcony, or maybe the hotel lobby entrance, phone in his hand, watching the likes go up, feeling like the king of the world. He probably thought I was here, crying in the dark. Maybe he thought I was packing his bags. He thought he won. He thought love won. That's the problem with narcissists. They think the rules are for other people. They think the laws of physics and the laws of the United States Treasury don't apply to them. But gravity always wins. Eventually, you always hit the ground. I watched the green dots on my screen converge on the hotel pin. 1 block away. The air in my office felt heavy, thick with the smell of old paper and impending doom. Outside, a distant train horn blew, long and low, a lonely sound. I felt a pang of something, not pity, never pity, just the cold realization of what happens next. The fireworks in his photo were fading, the pretty lights were going out, and the harsh reality of the lobby lights were about to turn on. The phone buzzed again, another tag. Thaddeus had commented on his own post. No looking back. He was right about that. There is no looking back now. The agents were entering the building. I know because the tracking dots turned red. They were inside. They weren't there for the champagne. They weren't there for the view. He didn't know that while he was looking at the fireworks, 2 agents were walking into the lobby of Le Maurice. An hour later, she posted again. But this time, she wasn't in the penthouse suite. She was in the lobby of the Paris Police Prefecture. The video was grainy, shot vertical, probably shaking in her trembling hand. Her eyeliner was running down her face in thick black rivers. She looked less like an influencer and more like a defendant. She was screaming at the camera, "I don't know what's happening. They took Thad. They won't let me in the room." You could hear the echo of a crowded, fluorescent-lit room behind her. It was chaotic, loud, and utterly pathetic. It was tragic, really. She thought she was the star of a reality show, but she was just an accessory to a felony. The numbers don't lie, but reality TV certainly does. Then she said the part that made me pause. "My cards are being declined. I can't even buy a water." The irony was rich. She was accessorizing with stolen company funds. Be honest with me in the comments. Do you feel sorry for her? Because sitting here in my kitchen watching her cry, I felt absolutely nothing. It was 3:30 a.m. here in Savannah. I was sitting at the kitchen island, still nursing that same glass of sweet tea. The ice had melted, watering it down. I took a sip anyway. It was lukewarm and overly sweet, just like revenge. She didn't realize it yet, but she wasn't just stuck in a lobby. She was a person of interest. International wire fraud is a big net, and she was swimming right in the middle of it. I refreshed the screen. The view count had jumped to 15,000. Then 20,000. The comments were rolling in faster than she could read them. People were starting to connect the dots. She loved the attention, even when it was bad. She thought any press was good press. She was about to learn that federal indictments are very, very bad press. And this is where it gets interesting, because the French authorities don't play by Savannah rules. What do you think happens when the embassy gets involved? Let me know your theory below. I watched her wipe her face with the back of her hand. She looked so small, so ordinary, just another girl in a police station, wondering where her sugar daddy went. My thumb hovered over the comment box. I wanted to type "check your email." I wanted to see her face when she realized she wasn't going home anytime soon, but I pulled back. I woke up at 6. The house was too quiet. The storm in Paris was over, but the mess here remained. I went to the kitchen. I didn't make coffee. I picked up the phone instead. I called a local junk removal service. They sent 2 guys in a truck. I didn't pack for him. I just pointed. "Take everything," I said. They started with the master closet. His tailored suits, the silk shirts, all gone. Then the watches, the Patek, the vintage Rolexes. I didn't even look at the price tags. I grabbed a Sharpie. I wrote donations on the biggest box. You might think I kept something for sentimental value. I didn't. There was no value left, just liability. I grabbed a roll of thick packing tape. I sealed the last box of his Italian leather shoes. There were 20 pairs. Loafers, sneakers, boots. He hadn't worn half of them. They were just for show, like our marriage. Then I sent the housekeeper home. Take the day off, Maria, I told her. She looked at the boxes. She knew something had happened. She just nodded and left. I locked the front door behind her. I went to the bedroom. I stripped the sheets, the mattress protector, the pillows, everything. The jasmine smell was still there. It was cloying. It was sick. I went to the hall closet. I pulled out the heavy yellow bucket. I filled it with bleach and vinegar and hot water. I got on my hands and knees. I scrubbed the hardwood floors. The fumes were stinging my eyes. My nose was running. But I didn't stop scrubbing. The floorboards gleamed. They looked new again. I walked into the master bath. I found the candle, the jasmine noir. He bought it for her. I could smell the wax. I struck a match. I watched the wick catch fire. I watched it burn down to the glass. Then I threw the empty jar in the trash can outside. It shattered. I walked through every room. I opened every window. The Savannah humidity rushed in. It was heavy. It was thick, but it was better than the rot inside. I went to his study. I saw the humidors, the cigars, the leather chair. I boxed it all up. I found the cufflinks I bought him, the ones with our initials. I threw them in the trash. Not the donation box, the trash. You don't pawn bad memories. I know what you're thinking. Solil, aren't you being a little petty? Maybe. But pettiness is just justice with a smaller balance sheet. I wanted the air in this house to be clean. I wanted to breathe without choking on his lies. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to erase someone from your life? Did it feel as good as this? By 10, the driveway was full. Cardboard towers. I taped a sign to the top one. In big black letters, free. I sat on the porch swing. I poured a glass of sweet tea. The ice clinked against the glass. I watched the street. First it was just the mailman. He slowed down, then came Mrs. Gable from down the street. She slowed her Volvo. She stared at the boxes. She saw the golf clubs. She knew Thad loved those clubs more than he loved breathing. Then the Hendersons pulled up. They pretended to be checking their mailbox. They were looking at the free sign. They were probably wondering where Thad was. I just raised my glass. A small toast to their curiosity. The buzz started. I could feel it, like static electricity in the air. Savannah is a small town. Everyone knows everyone's business. I checked my phone. No calls from Paris. No texts from Thad. Just the sound of the wind chimes. The house was finally clean. The ledger was finally balanced. But by noon, the neighbors were driving by, taking pictures. In Savannah, gossip travels faster than the wind. The neighbors weren't just watching anymore, they were documenting. I could see the Hendersons across the street, phones up, recording every cardboard box. Savannah heat has a way of cooking secrets right out of the pavement. I sat on my front porch swing. The wood was still warm from the morning sun. My iced tea was sweating onto the wicker table, leaving a ring of condensation on the wood. A black sedan pulled into the driveway at exactly 12:30 p.m. Not a florist van, not a friend with a lasagna. It was Dorothea. She stepped out in pearls and a black linen pantsuit. In her hand, a bottle of 20-year-old Glenfiddich. Not for cooking, not for grieving, for celebrating. Well, Soleil, she said, climbing the steps, the town is talking. She sat beside me on the swing. The chains groaned under the weight of 2 Beaumont women and 3 generations of secrets. The air smelled like gardenias and gasoline from the street. Let them talk, I said. She poured 2 fingers of scotch into crystal glasses she brought from her own kitchen. The amber liquid caught the afternoon light. He'll do time, Soleil, she said, passing me a glass. Embezzlement, wire fraud, fleeing the country with stolen assets. I took a sip. The scotch burned like truth going down. I know, I said. Dorothea pulled a document from her leather briefcase. It was creased from being folded and unfolded multiple times. The Morality Clause Amendment. Did you see this? She asked. I signed it 2 weeks before he left for Paris. I looked at the signature line, Mrs. Dorothea Beaumont. October 14th. The same day I smelled jasmine on Thaddeus's collar. The ink was slightly faded around the edges, as if she pressed hard on the paper. He never signed it, I said. Exactly, Dorothea said, but he didn't need to. As his legal guardian and trustee, my signature was sufficient to trigger the asset freeze. She took a sip of scotch. Her hand was perfectly steady. When he gets out, she said, he won't have a name. He won't have a job, and thanks to that morality clause, he won't have a cent. Can you imagine Thaddeus Beaumont with nothing? No cars, no watches, no trust fund, no reputation, just the clothes on his back and a criminal record. What would you do if you had to start over at 40 with nothing but a felony conviction? I honestly don't know if I'd survive that. You're not upset, I said. Dorothea looked at me over the rim of her glass. Her eyes were the same color as Thaddeus's. Cold blue. Soleil, I've been protecting this family since before Thaddeus was born. Some weeds require pruning. Some require pulling up by the roots. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small brass key. What's this? I asked. The safety deposit box, she said. The one Thaddeus thought contained his inheritance. The one he's been trying to access for months. She dropped the key into her scotch. It sank to the bottom with a soft plink. Empty, she said. I moved the contents to a trust in your name last month. I felt the heat of the afternoon press against my skin like a heavy blanket. But inside I felt cold, precise, balanced. The numbers had finally aligned. We raised our glasses. The crystal made a delicate chiming sound when they touched. To the legacy, Dorothea said. To the legacy, I echoed. The Hendersons across the street were still filming. They had no idea what they were recording. They thought they were witnessing a messy divorce. They were witnessing a silent coup, a bloodless succession. Dorothea looked at me then. Really looked at me. Like she was seeing me for the first time in 5 years of marriage. You know, she said, I always wondered if you had the stomach for this family. I do the math, I said. The math doesn't care about feelings. No, she said. It doesn't. She finished her scotch and set the glass down on the wicker table. The ice cubes clinked against the crystal. Thaddeus wanted excitement, she said. He wanted drama. He wanted to feel like the main character. She stood up and smoothed her pantsuit, not a wrinkle in sight. Well, she said, he's about to get exactly what he wanted. She walked down the porch steps, her heels clicking on the wood. A sharp, rhythmic sound, like a gavel. I watched her drive away. The black sedan disappeared around the corner. I looked at the empty glass in my hand, then at the key at the bottom, then at the neighbors across the street. Let them take their photos. Let them whisper. Let them speculate. In that moment on that porch, with the taste of scotch on my tongue and the humidity heavy in the air, I understood something. I looked back at where Dorothea had stood. I realized I had finally become the daughter-in-law she always wanted. Ruthless, reliable, rich. The certified mail arrived on a Tuesday, just a standard white envelope, but it weighed more than the rest of the pile combined. I sat at the kitchen island. The marble was cold under my elbows. I took a letter opener to the seal. The paper sliced open cleanly. Inside was the final decree of divorce. I laid it out on the counter. The paper was thick, crisp. At the top, it read State of Georgia, Chatham County. I ran my finger down to the first bold heading, Settlement Agreement. It was all there, the house, the brokerage accounts, the boat, even the dog. Buster was awarded to the plaintiff. That's me. Thaddeus didn't contest a single line. Why would he? He was currently in federal holding awaiting extradition. You can't negotiate leverage when your net worth is negative. The numbers simply didn't add up for him anymore. Have you ever watched a life collapse on paper? It's strangely quiet. No yelling, no crying, just black ink on white paper. I scanned down to the bottom of the page. There was a line for my signature, and one for his. His line was blank. His lawyer had signed it by proxy. Defendant waives appearance. I looked at the line next to my name. It didn't say Soleil Beaumont. It said Restoration of Name, Soleil Matsuda. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I wasn't that girl from the country club anymore. I wasn't the quiet wife keeping the secrets. I reached for my pen. It was a black fountain pen. I uncapped it. The nib gleamed in the overhead light. I thought about my wedding day. I had signed Beaumont then. I was smiling in that picture. I looked happy, but the numbers in that marriage never balanced. I put the pen to the paper. Soleil, Matsuda. I watched the ink dry. It was permanent. I was no longer a liability on his ledger. I was the asset. I folded the paper and put it in my leather bag. Then I got in the car. I drove downtown. The Chatham County Courthouse loomed over the square. It was a beautiful building, old stone, tall columns, but inside it smelled like floor wax and old anxiety. I walked through the metal detectors. They beeped. The guard waved me through. He knew who I was. Everyone in Savannah knows who I am now. I found the clerk's office on the second floor. The room was lined with file cabinets. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams. I approached the counter. The glass was scratched. I slid the decree across the counter to the clerk. She was a heavy-set woman with reading glasses on a chain. She picked up the paper. She adjusted her glasses. She read the name. Matsuda, she whispered. Then she looked up at me. Her eyes are sharp. Congratulations, honey, she said softly. She reached for her rubber stamp. Thud. Filed. She punched the date into the computer. April 14th, that was the day the audit finally ended. I took my copy. The paper was warm from her hand. I turned and walked back out into the hallway. My heels clicked on the terrazzo floor. Click. Clack. It sounded like a countdown. Or maybe a new beginning. I pushed through the heavy brass doors of the courthouse. The Georgia heat hit me like a wall. It was 90 degrees in the shade, humidity 100%. My hair stuck to the back of my neck instantly. But I didn't mind. I stood on the top step. I looked out at the city. The live oaks were dripping with Spanish moss. The traffic was moving slow on Bay Street. I took a deep breath. The air smelled like exhaust and damp earth. I looked back at the courthouse doors one last time, just for a second. Then I turned toward the parking lot. I walked down the steps. I felt lighter, like I had been carrying a ledger full of debt for years, and someone had just zeroed it out. I unlocked the car. I slid into the driver's seat. I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back was calm, controlled. She was Soleil Matsuda, and she was finally in the black. People ask me all the time if I miss him. They ask if I miss the life we had. I tell them I don't miss the lies, and I certainly don't miss the stupidity. I'm sitting on my front porch right now. The humidity is thick enough to chew. My glass is sweating on the wicker table. The condensation drips down my fingers, cold and wet. It's quiet here in the evenings. Too quiet, some might say. But to an accountant? It sounds like solvency. I run the company now. I walk into his office every morning. It is my office now. The mahogany desk is completely clear. No hidden receipts. No second laptops, just a spreadsheet in a vase of fresh flowers. I manage the trust too. Every penny is accounted for. I fired the entire accounting department. I had to do it. They were either complicit or incredibly stupid. I built a new team from the ground up. They know one rule: the numbers don't lie. People do. Sometimes late at night, the silence gets loud. So I check on him. I pick up my phone. I open Instagram. I type in THADEUS. His profile pops up immediately. It's set to private. A gray lock icon stares back at me. The text underneath says, "This account is private." He has 12 followers, probably his mother and his brother. He hasn't posted a single photo in 6 months. The profile picture is still that selfie I took. We were in Paris, or so I thought. He was smiling in the photo, wearing that Patek Philippe watch, the one I sold at Sotheby's last week. It went for $45,000. I used the money to renovate the guest house. The contractors finished last Tuesday. It has a new roof, new HVAC, a fresh coat of paint. It used to smell like his cologne. Now it just smells like drywall and lemons. Can you believe he thought he could take that watch? The audacity of it still makes me smile. I hear a car drive by outside. A neighbor slowing down to look at the house. They're wondering where Thaddeus is. They wonder where the Jaguars are. Why the party's stopped. I just wave from the shadows. They don't know about the federal indictment. They just know the Beaumonts got quiet. Speaking of quiet, Dorothea came by yesterday. She wore a cream-colored linen suit, starched and stiff. She sat right there in that wicker chair. The ice clinking in her glass was the only sound. We didn't speak about Thaddeus. We spoke about the quarterly earnings. She looked at me and said, "The stock is up, Salale." That was it. She doesn't miss her son. She misses the dividend checks. I just write them bigger now. It's a cold way to live. But in this town, cold keeps the bugs away. You know what they say about karma? They say it's a spiritual force. I think it's just basic arithmetic. Action, reaction, debit, credit. Thaddeus made a withdrawal he couldn't cover. And I was the bank calling in the note. Do I feel guilty? I look down at my hands. My manicure is perfect. Pale pink. No chips. No cracks. I feel like a freshly balanced ledger. Zero-sum game. I take a sip of my tea. It's bitter. No sugar. I've lost the taste for sweet things. I remember the day I signed the papers. April 14th. The ink was blue. It dried fast. The judge didn't even look up. He just stamped the document. Thud. Just like that. 3 years erased. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The air in Chatham County was humid, heavy on my skin. I felt lighter than I had in years. Like I had dropped a bag of rocks in the river. Now I sit here on this porch. The sun is setting over the marsh. The sky is turning a bruised purple. The Spanish moss is swaying in the breeze. It looks like gray hair in the wind. The first firefly of the evening flickers by the railing. I watch it blink. On, off, just like a signal. Morse code for "it's over." I used to be a wife. Now I am the outcome. I am the final line item. I am finally in the black. I want to know what you think. Was this justice or was this cruelty? Would you have done the same or would you have just walked away? They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. They're wrong. Hell hath no fury like a woman with a forensic accounting degree and a timeline. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I have more stories to tell. Some of them are even worse than this one. Drop a like if you made it to the end. And leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done. I read every single one.